The always materials. Humans have always loved gold. Its resistance to corrosion has made it useful to jewelers since the time of the first pharaohs. This association with wealth, combined with its persistent shininess, has made it a perennial favorite as a store of value and backer of currencies right up to the modern age. Until the world wars and the rise of the US dollar, gold was what most countries held to back their economic systems. And even in the age of US dollar supremacy, gold typically ranks third or fourth in most countries' reserves. In the digital age, the combination of gold's immunity to corrosion and its high electrical conductivity grants it niche applications in the semiconductor space. Industrial uses? Government uses? High value? Check. Store of value? Check. Pretty? Double check. And yet, gold is absolutely stupid. There is next to no opportunity for useful metallurgy or value add. You don't mix gold with a better material to get better conductivity because gold is already the best conductor. You don't mix it with a lesser material to degrade its conductivity because you can get the same result with cheaper substitutes. About the only time gold is alloyed is to make it so your rings don't bend while you wear them. Either it is the only thing to use for a product, or its use would be pointless. That makes its supply chain simple. Ore is mined, purified, transformed into mostly pure metal, and then you're done. The only way not so much to add value, but to establish cachet, is to have someone you trust turn gold metal into those fancy, commercially traded bars that we've all seen in James Bond films and imagine Fort Knox is full of. It is, by the way. Refiners and recyclers fly gold to this final coolification step. There's no slow boat for gold. These cool dudes melt it all down, check for purity, fashion those iconic ingots, and put their personal stamps of guarantee on the final product. Any of these dudes that matter are either Swiss or Emirati. China has been trying to muscle into this final step for decades. At a glance, it would seem China has a shot. It is the world's largest source of gold ore and home to many midstream refineries. People go to China for mass production and counterfeiting, not for exclusivity and authenticity. In a world without China, the biggest hit would be to ore inflow, and that's not nearly as damning for gold as it would be for anything else. Depending on overall economic circumstances, gold sourced from recycling is anywhere from 1/6 to 1/2 of production, with that number ballooning in times of economic stress. The harsh light of deglobalization is certainly going to encourage a lot of people to melt down all those class rings. With a global supply chain, a simple refining process, and by far the most technical aspect of gold bar production happening elsewhere, China could harmlessly be scooped out of the entire supply chain. Lead has long been a magical substance. Easy to mine, easy to refine, easy to shape, easy to alloy, easy to incorporate into any chemical mix to manifest whatever properties we want. Lead is particularly resistant to corrosion by water. By the mid-industrial age, we were using it in cars and paint and roofing and glass and pipes and glazes and coatings and gasoline. Lead only had one downside. Lead's toxicity generates no end of health complications in the brain, up to and including encouraging dissociative and violent behavior. Once lead is removed from where it might be ingested, its remaining uses are very, very few. Some metal alloys, which don't come into contact with people, ammunition, a product for which lead's toxicity might even be perceived as a bonus, and a bit in ceramics and some glass products. But the big boy is lead-acid batteries, a key component in nearly every motorized vehicle regardless of size. Pre-1970 batteries took less than 1/3 of all lead. Now, they absorb more than 4/5. In advanced countries that have had car cultures for decades, the process of replacing batteries builds in provisions for recycling. Some 90% of lead needs are met from recycled lead products. In more recently industrialized countries, with China at the top of the list, the process is less formalized. Most Chinese car batteries are collected, but only 1/3 are officially recycled. The rest seem to fall prey to the country's omnipresent counterfeiting and simply get new labels before being sold on as new product. Considering that old, overused lead batteries tend to leak and that lead is still freaking toxic, this is not a good thing. In any case, such mass lead recycling means the developed world can mosey right on without missing a beat. And should China find itself unable to access imported lead ore, it can at least comfort itself that an improved recycling program would both solve a big chunk of supply constraints and make for healthier living environments. OLYBDENUM, we're just going to call it moly. Moly is one of those materials that most of us haven't heard of, and for good reason. It doesn't tend to pop up in your average car bumper or doorknob. Moly is valued for its ability to weather extreme temperatures without significantly shifting form. Not extreme temperatures like when you are vacationing in Vegas in August, more like extreme temperatures when you are under napalm attack. If done right, moly-alloyed steel even becomes a superalloy, a material that maintains all its normal characteristics, even when within easy reach of its actual melting point. Militaries love to use moly in armor and aircraft and carbine barrels. In the civilian sector, moly tends to serve in very high-end industrial equipment and motors. as well as sorts of stainless steels that need to be as tough as physically possible, whether in construction, roll cages, high-end Asian cooking knives, or super high-end light bulbs. In powdered form, moly is used to fertilize cauliflower? The future of moly is likely A-OK. Moly is produced in a series of steps, often different for each different type of source ore, often in different facilities, often in the Western Hemisphere, and often linked to the specific steel foundries that alloy it. The result is a supply system far more segmented and resistant to vertical integration than something like bauxite. No Chinese stranglehold here. The essential materials. The first material is arguably the most important since it is the base material that makes everything from buildings to roads to telecom towers possible: iron ore. Regardless of variety or quality, iron ore comprises at least the majority, and often more than 90% of the material in every bit of steel humans use. This makes understanding the world of iron ore very simple. You just need to understand China. China sits squarely in the intersection of two quintessential trends of the modern age: rapid industrialization and urbanization on one hand, and China's trademark hyper-financing on the other. Any successful industrialization and urbanization requires new roads, new buildings, and new industrial plant, all of which require massive volumes of steel. Hyper-financing can help make all that happen, but in doing so, it overbuilds everything. Not just the roads and buildings that mean yet more steel demand, but also the industrial plant that is used to make the steel in the first place. China's industrialization push has proven so huge and so fast and so overfinanced that China isn't simply the world's largest producer of steel. It regularly ranks among the world's top 4 importers of steel, particularly the product sets on the higher end of the quality scale. But that overfinance also means China produces steel with zero regard for the reality of domestic needs. And so China is also the world's largest steel exporter, particularly steel product sets on the lower end of the quality scale. All that requires a worldful of iron ore. China isn't just the world's largest importer of the stuff. It doesn't simply take in more than the rest of the world combined. China imports more than the rest of the world combined times 3. China is the global iron ore market. As to production, Australia exports half of global iron ore volumes, with Brazil exporting half the remainder. Unsurprisingly, China gobbles up nearly all these southern hemispheric powers' exports, as well as additional big chunks from Russia, India, and South Africa. Nor is China the only country that uses steel. It is just the only country where the economics of steel are so fundamentally out of whack. Most everyone else uses iron ore produced a bit closer to home, or in many cases at home. Their balances are rounded out by the very big business of steel recycling. Roughly 1% of buildings in the advanced world are torn down every year, and every scrap of steel used to reinforce them is melted down, reforged, and given a second life, or third, or 18th. This duality between the ravenousness of China and the rather placid pace of steelwork everywhere else makes the forecast rather straightforward. The vast bulk of the world's iron ore production comes from countries that face limited to no security threats as the world deglobalizes. In descending order, Australia, Brazil, India, South Africa, Canada, and the United States. However, the countries that export the vastness of global steel, in ascending order, Ukraine, Germany, Russia, Korea, Japan, and above all China, are somewhere on the sliding scale between facing severe complications and utterly screwed. China's hyper-industrialization and hyper-financing have had a similar impact on the world of silver as they have on the world of industrial materials writ large. Big local production, big importing of ores, big processing into metals, and big exports. Roughly 1/4 of silver production is from dedicated silver mines, while the remainder is co-produced with lead or copper or zinc. Silver metal, particularly from jewelry, is also eminently recyclable. In terms of extraction and processing and refining and recycling, silver's production cycle is well distributed geographically. So while China is a big, indeed the biggest, player at all stages of silver supply, it is nowhere near the majority player, nor is it in a position to either by strength or weakness overly threaten silver supply to others.